Hi there everyone, welcome back to my channel. Now today for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, I get a lot of questions asking me about how they build their team. Like they've pulled some EXs, they've pulled some really good stuff for their characters, they now know what they're doing with their weapons and everything, but how do they actually build a team? And so for this reason, I've decided to compile a video that will give you everything that you need to know about team composition, about how you build up your team, which characters go with who, which abilities go with what, and all that good stuff. So if you're interested in learning how to build the perfect team for whatever content you're trying to clear, stay tuned and keep on watching. As always everybody, don't forget to check out all of the social links in the description box below, including my Discord channel if you want to chat some more Opera Omnia on there, my Patreon for all early access videos and all sorts of things like that, and my Twitch channel, which is fast approaching 1,000 followers. So if you guys could go on there and give me a quick follow and come and join me whenever I'm playing Opera Omnia on stream, I would love you guys for it. So the first thing that I want to cover is actually something that I covered back in my beginners video, but I think it's important to reinstate it here. Now that we're all a bit more advanced and we know a little bit more about the game, it's really important to help define which roles a character has in order to help you build up your teams. So I'm going to quickly go over all the different types of characters that there are, as well as give examples of characters that fit within that kind of role. But it's also important to note that a lot of characters, pretty much all of them, actually cover multiple roles, but they tend to specialise in one or two. So we're going to start with physical damage dealers. Now this is going to cover people who literally do what they say on the tin, they just deal a lot of damage and that's what they're there to do. So characters like Cloud, Sephiroth, Vayne, who's going to be coming up fairly soon, they're all just physical damage dealers. They all have their own nuances, but that's what their primary function is. And then you have magic damage dealers such as Kuja, Golbez and Rinoa, who again do a very similar role to the physical damage dealers, but they do it as magic, which can actually be more relevant than you might think. When some bosses resist physical, some bosses resist magic, but we'll get to that later. Then you have your tank characters such as Warrior of Light, Zack and Galuf, who are all characters that are designed to redirect damage towards themselves so that they're not getting hit. The majority of the time you don't find you actually use tank characters all that much at this moment in time, because they tend to be a bit slower on the mark, and something that I'll come back to repeatedly during this video is the fact that your score when it comes to finishing a challenge tends to be intrinsically linked to your turn count, and tanks tend to slow your team composition down. But if you are looking just to complete a trial of any kind, then having a tank in your party is never a bad thing. Then you have launcher characters, which are characters who initiate a chase sequence on purpose. So characters like Cloud again, Lael, it was very prominently featured for exactly this reason, and Noctis is capable of doing it on command as well. Are characters that are really good if you want to get to a summon quickly, because if you initiate a chase sequence you get more points towards your summon and things like that very quickly. And then for the offensive roles, the last one I want to cover is Tech, which is... they're quite rare characters, but they're characters that tend to bring something to the table that no other character can. And examples that I'm going to give here are going to be Setzer, primarily for his freeze mechanic, Quistis for her delay mechanics, and Rem for her swap turns mechanic. These are characters that tend to do really, really well in some events and much less good in others. So for example, Quistis is busted if you're against a singular boss, but if you're against multiple bosses all at once, then you tend to find that Quistis isn't quite as strong. Now support in this game is actually quite difficult to kind of cover all in one thing. You have to kind of split support into various different roles, because there's a lot of different things a support can be. For example, a buffer such as Ramza, Rosa or Cait Sith are mostly designed in order to try and make it so that you've got loads of buffs across your party so that your damage dealers deal more damage or you take less damage, things like that. Debuffers, the opposite, characters like Tidus, Lillicet and Kefka, who are designed to inflict debuffs on your opponents in as many ways as possible to lower their damage, lower their defenses, lower lots of different things, their max bravery, initial bravery, all sorts of different things. You then have Dispel characters like Faris, Vanille and Cid, who are designed to remove buffs from your opponent, but these tend to be used more rarely unless they're kind of mixed in with other things. You often find that Dispellers and Debuffers kind of cover each other, but the reason you don't use these as much is because debuffs tend to knock away a lot of buffs unless they're framed ones, at which point you may need a Dispeller. Then you have healer characters, who are characters that are designed to regen your health or instantly recover your health, so characters like Aiko, Aerith or Lena, who came out recently. Lena actually covers a lot of what support role is, which is why she's so popular at the moment. but they're characters that recover your HP, so if you're going up against something that is going to hurt you a lot, then you're going to need to be able to recover your HP. And then lastly, we have Brave Batteries, which are characters that are designed in order to just fill up your party's bravery as quickly as possible, and then so you can use them in either a chase sequence by using a character like Lael, or you can just burn it all as quickly as you can. So characters like Y'shtola, Selphie, and even Bartz are really good at this role. There's many more characters that cover these roles, as I've just stated, but these are just examples of them. And as I said, a lot of these characters cover multiple roles. So Bartz is a physical damage dealer and a Brave Battery, and then Y'shtola has a delay mechanic and she's a Brave Battery. Faris is a debuffer and a dispeller. There's lots and lots of different things that these characters can cover, but these are generally what you want to be looking at when you building a team. You want to know what you're actually putting them in the team for. A question that I get asked quite a lot actually, and it's something that I want to cover in this video, is I get asked what a selfish damage dealer is and why they're called selfish. Now the reason for this is that some characters work best on their own and tend to have a higher turn count, which is actually a bit of a double-edged sword due to the fact that the score system, as I said earlier, is directly linked to your turn count. So to give an example, Lightning can in some cases put out an extremely large amount of damage due simply to the number of turns that she gets seemingly for free, whether it be through her EX ability or the fact that her abilities just have a really low turn delay. You're just going to get loads and loads of turns with Lightning. But it's a lot less preferable to deal less damage over more turns than it is to deal more damage over less turns with a character like Golbez or Cloud, because you, again, like I said, your score is going to be linked to your turn count. You want to kill things as quickly as you can, but this isn't the only problem with it. It's especially true during a summon and during co-op missions, where you don't want a single character to hog all of the available turns during a summon for the duration of it, for a lesser damage total than you would have gotten if all three characters were doing something. It's for this reason that characters like Lael, who are launcher characters, things like that, and Lael was actually a launcher character and a Brave Battery at the same time and had a delay mechanic on him. This is why he was prominent for as long as he was. So a selfish character is someone who just hogs all turns for themselves and doesn't let anyone else get a word in edgeways. And this selfishness actually often gets reflected in a character's passive abilities, which tend to only buff themselves and not buff other characters. This being, characters like Lightning. Jecht is a good example of a selfish DPS character because all he does is damage. He doesn't do anything to the other party members. He doesn't debuff your opponents, really. What he's there to do is to deal damage. Squall is another really good example of a selfish damage dealer. In fact, Squall is particularly selfish because you have to build your team around him so that he can work at his full potential. But having the correct support characters with a damage dealer like Jecht, Lightning or Squall can really dish out pain if you actually build to do it that way. Something else that's very important when it comes to building up a team is your slot management for buffs and debuffs. While it's like all amazing and all lovely to see blue and red boxes popping up all over the screen that you've put up, it's really important to keep a balance between the number of buffs that your characters are providing each other and the number of debuffs that they're inflicting. You want to be tactical about which buffs and debuffs you aim to bring before you go in and count up how many they'll rack up so they don't start pushing each other away. So if your character has 6 buffs on them and then a 7th different one comes along, it's going to push one of the other ones away. This was why Beatrix and Cait Sith didn't work too well together when they came out, because they started nudging each other's buffs away. And then Kefko is a great example because he provides I think he provides 6 debuffs by himself if you use his his first attack, his second attack, and his EX attack. He racks up 6 debuffs just by himself. So stacking him up with somebody like Tidus, who is also a debuffer character that inflicts 3 debuffs that are actually the same debuff as Kefka, is going to result in a suboptimal party despite the fact that they do more damage when an opponent is debuffed, and that because they'll be fighting for the same thing and it just won't work that well. And then the same thing applies to buffs. So if you've got loads of characters, as I mentioned earlier, like Beatrix and Cait Sith, that are nudging each other away, that's not so good. But because of this, framed buffs are especially noteworthy when it comes to playing this balancing act with buffs and debuffs. Even more so if they're a singular buff on a singular character that buffs your entire party. Examples of this include Rose's Prayer, Agrius's Brave, and Barrett's Avalanche, because they're a single buff that go on that character, and yet they affect the entire party, because it's just making so much more room for other buffs to be applied. So when you're building up a party, consider the number of buffs that you'll be applying to your party and the number of debuffs that you'll be applying to your opponents. There are some characters, for example Noctis, Selphie and Bartz, who have passive abilities in their kits that don't just provide a buff to themselves, but they provide their entire party a buff that doesn't even show up as a visible buff, which means that they don't take up one of your slots when you're factoring in your buffs and debuffs. So these tend to be extremely desirable in a party. So if you've got somebody like Selphie who's like buffing initial bravery and attack just by being there, then that's a really nice thing to know. And then if there's multiples of the same character that have this kind of buff through either a co-op event or a friend unit, then these auras do usually stack. So if you happen to be in a co-op with, say, 3 Noctises, or 3 Barts, even better, that all have synergy and they all have their simple masteries and stuff that are all kicking off all over the place, your bravery is going to go through the roof. So you should rejoice if you get to benefit from this, because it's great fun. Something else that's important to look at whenever you're building your team is to look at where your friend unit and your summon fits into the ability to exploit those particular things. So while it's easy to throw in the strongest damage dealing character you have as a friend unit to go in with you, sometimes you have to look at how your friend unit fits into your composition, and more importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, which character that's in your team you plan on switching out for them when the time comes for you to do so. For example, if you have a team that consists of Rosa and Agrias and then a third character, you probably don't want to be switching out one of those 2 characters because their framed buff will leave with them, and therefore you're going to bring in a friend unit that won't do as much damage as they would do if those 2 had been there. So part of the reason that Quistis is quite such a strong friend unit is because she deals damage while bringing amazing delays, so that's like against a singular boss she just absolutely ruins them, but she also brave batteries the other 2 members of the party, and she's debuffing your opponent's speed and turn count if she's being used effectively. So taking out a damage dealer for a character that's going to just be able to stop your opponent from getting any further can be really useful. So, and again, if I said Agrias and Rosa again, then your third character might benefit from being a really high damage dealer like Rinoa or Golbez, so then you're just going to be buffing them like hell by using the other 2. But then you've got to work out, obviously, where the summon fits into it as well. If you're using Rinoa, and I'm going to use Rinoa as a few examples in this, she hurts herself whenever she attacks, usually. So having Ifrit as your summon, who benefits your attack if your HP is above a certain amount, might not be as useful to somebody like Rinoa or Dark Knight Cecil, for example, as a different summon. So you need to work out which summon goes with the party that you're trying to use. You tend to only use a few different summons anyway. So there's Ifrit, Brothers, Bahamut, Pandemonium if you're using launchers. There's very few, or Sylph/Chocobo if you just want something really quick and easy. There's very few summons that you really need to be worrying about. And then lastly, once you kind of set out your roles, what you want your characters to do, everything like that, and then set up your friend unit, everything as well, you kind of sometimes need to go into a little bit of a finer detail to see whether 2 or 3 party members actually links well or not. I'm going to give 2 examples here, and the first of which is going to be Squall and Cait Sith. Squall entirely revolves around his initial bravery. Cait Sith doesn't buff your initial bravery, buffs is a brave battery, which doesn't really work very well with Squall's kit anyway because he wants to be below his initial bravery in order to get the plus versions of his attacks. But he'll buff his physical damage and his max bravery, but that's not going to work all that well if he can't use the plus versions of his abilities. And then Rosa and Rinoa, for example, again, Rinoa hurts herself when she attacks. Rosa's Prayer is an extraordinary buff, but it only works if you're either above 80% HP or below 50%. With the way that Rinoa works, you're going to be within that frame of, within that gap of HP where you're not going to be able to benefit from Rosa's Prayer. So pairing those 2 up isn't going to work all that well. Sometimes it's just a simple case of expanding your roster to fit what you already have. For example, in an example of Squall and Cait Sith, switching Cait Sith out for Selphie, who buffs initial bravery and is a brave battery that actually works with Squall, is going to be much more beneficial. And then if you happen to have Golbez works 10 times better with Rosa than Rinoa does, because he doesn't hurt himself to attack and still deals an absolute butt ton of damage. So it's useful to know exactly what your party members are capable of before pairing them up with somebody. Another example of that is elemental debuffs. For example, Paladin Cecil has a holy debuff, Golbez has a dark debuff. If you can pair them up with another character that benefits from that, then your damage potential is going to hit much higher numbers. And then the last thing I want to talk about is researching what your party is actually going to be used for. it's always good to just not throw out what you think is your strongest team or whoever has synergy, although I say that synergy teams do tend to work pretty well most of the time for an event. Sometimes you can come out on top and it just works. Other times you might get unpleasantly surprised. For example, if you go into a boss with Rinoa, Golbez and Lena and your opponent resists magic, you're not going to be doing an awful lot of damage to them. So there's a good reason that Opera Omnia has the option to kind of expand and have multiple parties. This is a game that that rewards having a wide variety of characters that you can use and not concentrating everything on one or two characters. This is where I think that having the roles kind of specified before going into the video is important, because you want to make sure that your party is balanced and you want to make sure that you have the ability to kind of draw, from whichever box you need to. So, for example, in your roster, if you have Kuja, Golbez, Rinoa, you've got all these crazy magic damage dealers, but you don't have any physical damage dealers, then maybe the next time somebody comes around that it fulfills that role, so whether it's your Sephiroth, your Vayne, or Cloud, anything like that that can do really strong physical damage, that will be a character that you want to pull for. Similarly, you've also got to remember that events tend to be revolved around the characters that they're meant for. So if you're struggling on an event because you can't dispel a framed buff, chances are that was on a banner that had a character that has the ability to dispel somebody. So obviously don't pull for every banner, but try to fill the gaps in the roles that you might be missing when you're building up your roster for the game. So to round out the video, I'm going to go over a few examples of team compositions that I really enjoy, and I obviously am not going to go over every character here. Give examples of your favourite team compositions in the comments below and let me know what you think. I love experimenting with new characters and stuff like that, so it's really fun to do that. But the first team I'm going to talk about is quite a simple one. It's going to be Lena, Rosa and Golbez. So this is going to be assuming that you have every available weapon, etc. for any of these characters, but in this particular situation you have Lena, who's providing Windrake's arrow, so you're not going to get debuffed at all. You've got both Lena and Rosa providing Brave batteries to Golbez, who does a really high amount of damage, particularly with Brave overflows. Rinoa would also work well here, despite the fact that she doesn't work very well with Rosa, because Lena can keep her HP up because she has the HP regen. And then your bravery across the board is just going to be very high. Your defenses are going to be really nice because you've got so much brave regen, HP regen. Lena's initial bravery down is going to do nice things. And then after the EX has gone off from Golbez, then your damage potential is going to be really high. This is going to be a nice sort of steady 2 supports, 1 damage dealer. It'll work pretty much with any damage dealer, to be honest. Lena and Rosa just work really well together, or you can obviously just change Rosa for a different damage dealing character and that will work as well. But I like these particular 3 to you can actually switch in a second Golbez as a friend unit and it will work really well just to get that extra burst of damage in. But if you want just consistent damage that's just going to last for a long time, then this is a really good go-to team. Then the next team I want to talk about is going to be Cloud, Agrias and Quistis. And taking a Quistis friend is never going to hurt here. But the idea with this particular team is your opponent's just never going to get a turn. Because you have Cloud and Agrias work really nicely together anyway, because Agrias can give a Brave battery effect as well as Quistis through their Brave abilities and the Degenerator Whip, which Cloud can take advantage of through Finishing Touch, launching a chase sequence so that you get the full amount of damage from all 3 of them, and that's going to fill your summon gauge higher. Cloud and Agrias both have the ability to paralyze your opponent through Judgment Blade and Cross Slash, particularly Cross Slash Plus. So if they're getting a turn, it's probably not going to do anything, and then Quistis can delay your opponent even further, provide debuffs, can make it so that you've got the delay, and so if you get a friend Quistis in as well, then your opponent's just never going to get a turn. If you're against a singular boss, the chances are you're just going to kill them before they've even... Because Cloud's damage is high, Agrias' damage is high, Quistis' damage can be high in combination with Agrias, or once that Quistis is finished, you then change it for the second Quistis to make the fight last a little bit longer. You'll find that a single target boss is just never going to get a turn with this one. Particular pairing that I actually really love at the moment is Kefka and Ramza, and the reason for that is because they fulfill the debuffing role so perfectly, and I actually do break my rule of no more than 6 debuffs in a team a little bit here, purely because Ramza's EX provides a debuff in Innovate that actually mirrors Kefka's EX framed debuff. So if you can get Kefka's Light of Judgment to lower attack, defense and speed, his Havoc Wing debuff also lowers attack, defense, and speed. And then Ramza's Enervate also debuffs attack, defense, and speed. Your opponent's going to be hitting like a wet noodle. You're going to be hitting them like a bus, and they're going to be doing it slowly. And then if you really need it, you still have Kefka's Trine if you're in a desperate situation. Pairing them up with a really strong, fairly selfish damage-based character like Sephiroth is going to do absolute wonders for you. Sephiroth hits like a bus anyway, and luckily he only buffs himself with his framed buff from the Reunion and through Genova, and this obviously again assuming that he has his EX. So your damage potential is all there. Ramza brings the longevity to the fight, and Kefka can just provide some pretty crazy debuff shenanigans alongside Ramza. And then another team that I wanted to quickly look at is a team that's going to be based around a particular element, and I think that the best way to go about this is actually through Holy, using Aiko, Paladin Cecil, and Kuja. All three of these characters have the ability to use a Holy attack. So Paladin Cecil, most of his damage is Holy, Aiko's Smite is Holy, Kuja's Ring Holy is, well, obviously Holy, and then you've got Paladin Cecil being able to buff the defenses, Aiko having HP regen. You just got your defenses are so backed up that you're just not going to get hurt very much. And then once that Cecil's EX attack goes off, you get Holy Resist down on your opponent's party, which means your Kuja's going to be hitting harder, your Aiko's going to be hitting harder, your Cecil's going to be hitting harder. You get really nice little synergies between these characters, and there are actually loads of examples of elemental-based teams. I really want an excuse to use Fujin. I think I'm just going to have to wait until her EX comes around because, bless her, she's not the strongest character in the world, but I wanted to give an example of a team that can utilise a particular element to their advantage. And then the last team that I want to talk about is one that I plan on building if he's nice to me, pray tell. But it's one that's more built around a bit of fun than it is about anything else, because there's nothing wrong with that either. And I want to build up Sephiroth, Paladin Cecil and Kuja together, much more, similar to the other one, but they all have something in common. And I basically want to build team hairography, because look at them, look at their beautiful silver hair, each of them. But luckily, they do actually work quite well together anyway, because Paladin Cecil provides the buffs and the kind of the Brave battery mechanics. Kuja is just going to deal damage. Sephiroth is also going to deal damage. Like, they're just both going to go in. They've got one physical, one magical, so obviously it's not going to work against anything that resists either. But I think it would be a really great fun team to use. I might have to put a Setzer friend unit in there as well, just because, it's a little techie play, and he also has lovely silver hair. So I just wanted to basically touch on the fact that sometimes you can just throw caution to the wind and build a team for the hell of it, because the worst that can happen is you fail a mission and you go in with something else. It's not the end of the world. So that's going to be it for my Team Composition 101 video. I hope that this has all been helpful to some of you. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching the video. Let me know in the comments below, as I've said before, what your favourite teams to use are in Dissidia Opera Omnia. Don't forget to check out DissidiaDB.com, because it's the website I use for all of my information, and if you want to check out which passives a character has, what a character's abilities do, how they pair up well with another character, then definitely go and check out that site because it's phenomenal. Don't forget to check out all of the other content creators for Opera Omnia. There are so many of us now, and it's a really lovely community, so I very much encourage you to go and chat to everybody. Don't forget my social links in the description box, and obviously don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you ever so much for watching again, and hopefully I'll see you guys on either Twitch or YouTube very, very soon. Bye!